Hi, this is Tim Cant for Native Instruments, and I'm going to show you how to make a techno track with NI's Electric Impulse bundle that's on offer right now. A lot of the content in this bundle is Maschine based, but there's a whole load that isn't, so in this tutorial I'm going to use Ableton Live for my sequencer, Kontakt for my sampler, and a few other NI instruments and effects. The techniques we're going to look at here are transferable to whatever DAW or sampler you use, so let's dive right in. For this tutorial, I wanted to make a relatively energetic techno tune, so I began by setting the project tempo to 128 BPM, then began to look for an appropriate kick sound. I selected Kick Graphite 1 from the Timeless Glow expansion because it had a solid 909 feel. The kick's attack stage is really quite soft. I remembered hearing another kick from the bundle that was essentially just a transient, Kick Bloom from the Lone Forest expansion, and I thought that these two kicks might sit well together in the mix without too much work, so I layered them up. I felt that the overall result could have more clarity, so I wanted to see if I could get a better result without resorting to equalization or dynamics processing. So I used one of Live's stock plugins to invert the polarity of the Layer Bloom 1 track. This instantly gave the composite kick a punchier, cleaner feel. Although I was happy with the kick from an aesthetic point of view, after doing some referencing I realised that this kick simply didn't have the bottom end necessary to compete, so I used Solid EQ to take out the low end of the body kick so that I could replace it with something weightier. I searched for kick with a really weighty low end to provide the sub energy and settled on Kick Skater 2 from the Motor Impact library, which needed to be tuned down 4 semitones to sit with the other kicks. This kick didn't sustain as long as I wanted, so I used Transient Master with a maximum sustain setting to make it sound as full as possible. Next, I wanted to create a hi-hat pattern. Typically, in a techno tune, it's easy to hear the character of the open hat, so I decided to choose this sound first, and went for the Open HH Cavernous sample from the Carbon Decay pack. I tuned this up a semitone in Kontakt to make it sound more sympathetic with the kick, and turned down the sustain and decay to tame its tail. Next, I selected a closed hat sample that I felt would complement the open hat, going for Closed HH Wool DS from the Cavern Floor pack. I turned up the velocity to volume modulation level in Kontakt so that I could have a more obvious difference in the volume level of the notes I entered, and sequenced a pattern that plays the first 2 16th notes of each beat with a slightly quieter first note. This gave me the basic rhythm I wanted, and I knew that at some point I'd want to add a clap. I picked Clap Helios from the Prismatic Bliss pack, which has a 909 style feel to it, and sequenced it on every other beat. Here are the tops together with the kick. Currently the rhythm is really straight, so I wanted to add some atmosphere and rhythmic interest with some reverb. A popular trick in techno is to use reverb pre-delay to create rhythmic interplay between the dry and wet signals. I used RC48 on the clap with a high pre-delay level to achieve this, turning down the bass and mid faders to clean up the sound a little. The clap now sounded a little incongruous with the rest of the beat, so I decided to process the highs a little. First I used Dirt to saturate the open hat, followed by RC24 to apply some small hall reverb. The closed hat was just saturated with no reverb. So at this stage we've got a functional beat, and I wanted to begin adding some musical elements. Typically techno tracks don't have a huge number of different sounds in them, so I was keen to find something that would set the vibe of the track and give me a basis to work from. I auditioned lots of sounds and settled on bass D-sharp Findlar BS from the Polar Flare pack, a synth bass stab with an atmospheric reverb that had a bit of a bleak character which I was really feeling. I put this straight onto an audio track on the last eighth note of the second bar of a 4-bar sequence, and transposed it down 3 semitones to fit with the tuning of the track's kick. At this point we've got an idea of the vibe we're heading towards, but before I added any ear candy type sounds, I wanted to make sure the track had a strong driving element, so I chose a bass sound. I wanted something that felt solid in the mids, but didn't necessarily have to be too subby. I selected Bass C Micro Loop 1 from the Byte Riot Pack and loaded this up in Kontakt. A single sample played repeatedly isn't going to give us a very satisfying feel though, because it'll sound the same every time. Thankfully, we can mitigate that by using some of Kontakt's built-in processing. I began by adding a low-pass 2-pole ladder filter and assigned the filter cutoff frequency parameter MIDI CC1 so that I could control the cutoff with my MIDI controller mod wheel. Next I applied the saturator effect to rough up the sound, then added a chorus in an instrument insert effect slot which gives our bass movement and prevents it from sounding the same every time it's played. I then added reverb in the instrument send effects section to enhance the sound's stereo image and give us a little atmosphere, and added a final touch of some solid EQ to take out some of the low end so that the bass doesn't interfere with our subby kick. The beat and bass line are now in place, and these are the real essentials of a techno track, so anything else we add is really a bonus. The choice one has to make as a producer is to find the balance of clarity of the driving rhythmic components with enough, arguably extraneous, but more intriguing ear candy elements. I naturally wanted to show off some of the electric impulse sounds and give the track a sense of progression, so the challenge was to balance those desires without overwhelming the all-important drum and bass. The first sound I came across that felt fit with the vibe I was after was the synth 135 Anarchy loop from the Motor Impact expansion. Because this is a highly rhythmic loop, I used Live's Beats warping mode to stretch it to fit the project's slower tempo, and because I wanted it to sound tight, I set the transient loop mode to off and turned down the transient envelope to give it a gated feel. I transposed it up 10 semitones to fit with the rest of the musical elements. Next I added NI's Byte Bit Crusher and Dirt Distortion to rough it up a bit, and added reverb with RC48. Another sound I wanted to feature was Acid 133 B-sharp Fabric from the Carbon Decay pack, which I stretched and pitched to fit with the rest of the project. I really like the acid feel of this loop, but having it simply play over and over the same every time would be a bit boring. Of course, as it's a loop, I couldn't modulate the synth sound, so I used Replica XT with a dotted 8th note delay and no feedback, and automated the mix level, allowing me to modulate the rhythm of the loop and introduce some interesting rhythmic juxtapositions with a little effort. I also used Dirt and Byte to give the sound a more analog feel, and the settings I've used give the sound a pleasant organic noise that can be heard clearly at the start of the track when just the kick and 303 are playing. I also applied Native Instruments' choral chorus effect before the delay to widen a track stereo image, and took out some of the lows with solid EQ. Next, I decided to add some FX to help punctuate the start of each section and transition more smoothly between sections. I began with Buzz Lander from the Prismatic Bliss pack, using Enhanced EQ to take off the highs and Replica XT to provide an 8th note ping pong delay. Having some kind of simple hook at the end of a section can work really well in many forms of dance music, and I really wanted to have a retro feeling 808 style snare in there somewhere. So I used Snare Destiny from the Motor Impact library to play a 16th note snare roll that increased in velocity to build up to each new section. What's unusual about the way I processed this was that I placed a dirt distortion insert effect on the sound without resampling it. So, rather than having a consistent level of distortion, as the velocity rises, the snare sound becomes increasingly saturated, giving a feel of a snare roll running into an analog desk which is already redlining. Crash Destiny, again from the Motor Impact library, is a very straightforward, clean crash sound that I felt could emphasise the start of each section without distracting too much from the other elements. I used a quarter note delay on this to prevent it from feeling too clean. So far I've used a lot of retro style elements, and I felt that a touch of new school flavour was required, so I selected the massive patch Capri from the Prismatic Bliss library to create an accent at the start of every 4 bars. This was saturated with dirt, and extra reverb came courtesy of RC48. To help lead into each new section, I used another massive patch, Semi, from the Decoded Forms expansion, that plays halfway through the last bar of each 4-bar section. A final massive patch, Summer from the Carbon Decay library, was then added to provide a simple call and response lick with the first bass stab that I added. Solid EQ was applied to take out some of the patch's high end and make it less present so that it slotted better into the mix. To provide a sense of tension during the breakdown and later in the track, I used the Prism patch Suspended 1 from the Prismatic Bliss expansion playing a sustained note, which is automated to fade out before the introduction of the next section. I wanted the beat to step up on the drop, so I used the Shaker Galette loop from the Timeless Glow expansion, using Ableton Live's beat mode transient envelope to tighten it up. To ensure I could get a loud mix, I put the synth elements into a group and used a copy of the 909-esque kick track to feed the sidechain input of a solid bus compressor, which gives me more headroom and helps the kick punch through the mix. Finally, let's take a look at the arrangement so that you can hear how the track builds up and breaks down.